And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Worthy of Show podcast. I'm so excited that you are here. Today, we are tackling the question of why did she get everything I wanted and why wasn't I enough? This is one of the most difficult parts of healing from an abusive relationship because it's like, I didn't really want to be with them and he was abusive. And before I actually dive in, I am fully aware that men are not the only abusers and that women are more than capable of being abusive. However, I work with women who are in heterosexual relationships with men. I have experience in relationships with men, so that is the perspective that I am coming from. So don't come at me. I am very much aware. I've talked about this in length, but what I'm going to be referencing is the perspective of a woman who was with a man. Getting all of that out of the way, let's dive in. So I 100% get this. My computer, my camera is crooked. Sorry, y'all. That did not help. Should have figured this out beforehand. But this breaks my heart because I have been there. Because it's like, you don't really want to be with them, but you also love them and you also miss them. And it's like, why did she get everything I wanted? I worked so hard. I made the lunches and I made sure that he was able to go to work. And I even applied to jobs for him. Why didn't he show up for me? Why is he showing up so much for her? First, I want you to take a big deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and remind yourself of how strong, capable, intelligent, worthy you are. Because regardless of anything else, those are the facts. So this question is not difficult to answer per se, but it's difficult to address because your brain is not going to want to accept what I'm about to share with you. Your brain is going to find every reason to put you down because that's the life it's been living in, right? Your brain has been living in massive amounts of toxicity. It's been living under gaslighting and manipulation and self-gaslighting and abuse, whether it's physical abuse or non-physical abuse, whether it's financial abuse or familial abuse or all of this stuff. And your brain doesn't want to see you rise because if you get up one more time, you may not survive being knocked down. So your brain is automatically going to disagree and try to argue with what I'm about to say. So if your brain does that, I want you to know that you are not broken. Your brain is not broken. You are human and you are healing and you are fighting through things you didn't ask for. You are fighting through things you did not consent to. All of this is normal and it makes sense based on what happened. Okay? So I'm going to be real with you. But I want you to understand what your brain is going to do. Because if you know that going in, okay, Carly said my brain was going to do this, and Carly said my brain was going to argue, and so it's going to argue, and I'm going to let it argue, but I'm also going to make sure that it knows that it's not going to win. So first things first, it has nothing to do with you. The abuse that you received is not your fault. The circumstances that you were pushed into was not your fault. The fact that you stayed is not your fault. The fact that you struggle right now is not your fault. The fact that he moved on to somebody else and is now flaunting them in front of you is not your fault. Period. End of story. Whether you believe me or not, those are the facts. I can't talk. I'm so sorry, y'all. It's my second live of the day, and I can't talk to save my life. Also, I want to make sure that you realize, for anyone who's new, if this is your first time hanging out, whether you're listening on the podcast or you're watching here on YouTube, none of anything I say is ever said in judgment because I've been there. I have no room to judge anybody. I have no room to put anyone down because I've been there. Like, I've lived it. I've been there. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, took it back, bought 2 more, took it back and tried to exchange it for a better one. No. Mm-mm. I can't judge. I can't judge because I've experienced it. So none of what I share is ever said in judgment. But I'm being real because it was someone being real that saved my life. So that's why I'm going to, make you probably a little bit uncomfortable, but only because I love you too much to let you stay stuck. So I want you to think back to the beginning of the unhealthy relationship. I want you to think back to the very beginning, the reason that you got stuck to him to begin with. I want you to think about that for a second. On the outside, did anything look wrong? Or did everything look perfect? Even though you felt something off in your gut, he was bringing you flowers. He was taking you out on dates. He made you feel so special. Even if he couldn't afford a big fancy dinner, he made you feel so special on date 3 that he brought you over to his house on his living room floor and you had a picnic. And he did all of these things and you went to a theme park and you went out and you talked all the time. And things seemed so perfect on the outside. Things seemed so perfect on the outside. Why did they seem so perfect? Because it felt so good. And so we have to remember that what we see, what's shared on the outside, isn't necessarily what's happening in reality. I don't know about y'all, but when I was in the unhealthy relationships, I shared so much on social media. Like back in the day, I didn't really have like Twitter and Instagram, but I had Facebook. And Facebook loves to remind me of all those Facebook memories. My goodness. And I would say, oh my God, my boyfriend brought me lunch to work today. He was so sweet. But what they didn't see is the argument that we had before about how he did say that he was going to bring me lunch. And then he decided to change his mind. But then I didn't bring food. So it was a big old fight. And then I ended up missing my lunch at work to where I couldn't even eat the lunch. And he brought me until after work. But what I shared was my boyfriend brought me lunch. I shared on social media how sweet it was that my boyfriend gave me his t-shirt and I felt so special. But what I didn't share on social media is that he decided that my consent didn't matter the night before. Right? Like, we share on the outside what we want people to see. We don't share the realities because that's painful and it's hard to explain, right? But we tend to forget that. We forget that the reality is different than what's shown, right? Because you can take a piece of trash and wrap it in Tiffany blue wrapping paper and get the perfect, sparkly, pretty bow, and you can wrap it with gloves on, and it's so beautiful, but on the inside, it's still trash. But we forget that we wrapped our trash in Tiffany blue wrapping paper. And we look at what someone else is doing and we look at their relationship and we go, but they have it so perfect. She has it so perfect. And why did I work so? And we forget that we hid our trash, just like they're probably hiding their trash. But now you have to realize too, that your abusive ex knows that it's painful for you. And they know that it hurts. And they know that they are hurting you by flaunting their new relationship all over social media. They know. Artist Haven, if you polish a turd, it's still a turd. Yes and amen. I love you, dude. But we forget that they are using this. Sorry, I got off track with that comment. It just totally threw me off. But they are showing off to bait you. Because what happens, and if you've been hanging out with me for a while, if you've listened to the podcast, or if you hang out with me on social media, there is a cycle of abuse that happens. And just because you're out of the relationship doesn't mean that the abuse ends, right? There's post-separation abuse. We're seeing that a lot with Kim and Kanye. That's a whole nother video. But just because you're out of the relationship doesn't mean that it ends. And just because you're out of the relationship doesn't mean that contact ends. And if they can get you to believe that they are giving their all to this new partner, to this new person, it's going to be a lot easier to hoover you back in, to suck you back in, because they're showing you that they're capable, because they always were capable of giving you what you wanted. They were always capable, but they chose not to. But if they're giving it to someone else, it's a lot easier to pull you back in. It's a lot easier to get you to want to go back, because it's like, okay, well, if he got her flowers, he can give me flowers now. Oh, if he says he loves her, he can say he loves me. If he's capable of taking her out to these places, he's capable of doing it for me. And we get stuck in the mind games. And if you relate to this, again, this is not your fault. You are not to blame. Even if you got sucked back in, even if you are currently in the phase right now where you feel yourself getting sucked back in, one, don't beat yourself up. That's the last thing your brain needs. And two, take a deep breath and realize who the F you are. There is a reason that you left to begin with. And just because he's showing you a piece of who he can be, it doesn't mean he's not going to do the same exact bait and switch he did last time. And the same exact bait and switch that he did with the new girl that he's getting ready to do with you. And I know that that's painful. And I know that that hurts. And I know that it's not fair. But we've got to be real. They prey on us feeling like we're not enough. I say this a lot, but the very first thing an abuser does is they gaslight the ever-loving crap out of you. And they make you believe that you are not worthy, and that you are not deserving, and that you are not good enough, and that you can't even trust the ground under your feet. You can't trust what you see, so you're only leaning on them. And this is because once they've done that, they can do whatever, and you're going to believe them because now your only point of reference is them. Just because you've gotten out of the relationship does not mean that that piece is over. And the reason why this is so important and why I want to share this, the reason why this is so important is because there are so many people right now, and I'm seeing this and I'm getting a lot in my DMs, especially because it's that time of year, right? It's spring, it was just Valentine's Day, it's been... where people are feeling they're out and about, and we're seeing the couples, right? We're seeing the holding hands, and they're feeling lonely, and you're feeling lonely. But the difference is you're feeling lonely and you want intimacy and connection. They're feeling lonely and they want power and control. Tish, he or she, it goes both ways. Yeah, I referenced this in the beginning. I talk about that a lot, but I work with women, and I work with women who have been in relationships with men. And with my experience, I have been in relationships with men. And so that's the point of reference that I have. And that's why, that's what I go off of. I talk quite a lot about how it goes both ways, but in this case, that's what I'm referencing. But we have to remember that abusers thrive on the negative energy that they get. So they're lonely, and instead of doing work to actually get connection, they are thriving off of the negative energy that they get from you, because it's a game of power and control. And if they can have power over you, and if they can control you, even if they're not with you, they get off on that. And so when you are questioning yourself and you are asking, why was I not enough? Why is he giving her everything that I wanted? Why did I give my all? Why is all of this stuff happening? It's because they are doing the exact same thing to them that they did to you. It's all a game. That doesn't mean that you're not enough. It doesn't mean that you are not worthy. It means that you got sucked into a game that you didn't even ask to play. It doesn't mean that you're stuck there. It doesn't mean you have to live there. But the very first step to healing is recognizing what's happening. And it's recognizing the reality of how our brain is reacting. Because if we are feeling like we're the only ones, and if we are feeling like it's all our fault, they've won. We have to make sure that we call out our own brains and our own healing in order to break free of this pattern. So yes, they may be flaunting the new supply in front of you to get a reaction and to feel like they are still in control. And recognizing this does not make the situation any easier, but it does bring reason into the equation. And your brain right now is not acting logically, and it's not going to like reason. But once you begin to plant the seed of reason, it's going to resist it, but eventually it's going to question if it's real. And once it questions, that is your opportunity to open up and be like, absolutely, this is real, and we are worthy, and we do deserve better, and we are not going to settle. I missed the beginning. Are you talking about romantic relationships specifically? Yes. So I am an abusive relationship recovery coach. So I work with women who are in romantic relationships with abusive men. That's my niche because that's my experience. So we recognize this. So recognizing it is cool, Carly. That's all fine and good. But what do I do right now? Because my brain is resisting everything that I'm throwing at it. And so come here. You got to stop stalking. You got to stop the internet stalking. And I know it's really freaking hard because social media makes everything so accessible. But if they are flaunting their new supply in order to get to you, you are giving them exactly what they want by continuing to stalk them. And the only thing you're doing is hurting yourself. The only thing that you are doing is causing more pain and harm to your brain. So you've got to stop stalking them. You've got to stop checking on their pictures. You've got to stop checking to see if anybody's liked them. You got to stop checking their followers list. Hit the block button. And I know it's really freaking hard. Like I'm saying this like it's easy, and it's definitely so much easier said than done. But we have to be willing to let them go. And if you're anything like me, you've blocked, and then you're like, well, no, I'm just going to check. I'm just going to unblock. I'm just going to look at one thing, or I'm just going to unblock them, but I'm not going to look because you're hoping that they text you, right? You block and then unblock, and then you block and then you unblock. I'm calling myself out. I'm literally looking at myself, my little like selfie screen here. I'm calling myself out too. We have to hit that block button and leave that block button alone. And if you struggle with leaving the block button alone, get a community of people around you. That community could be a Facebook group. It could be an in-person group. It could be one friend that you text instead of texting that person or instead of stalking that person. For a long time, I had a couple of friends that I would text as if they were the person, as if they were my toxic, abusive ex. I would write out the whole message and then I'd send it. And then I'd just be like, hey, sorry, that was for so-and-so. And they'd be like, okay. And they were there and they accepted it because they knew that that's what I needed for healing. And that kept me from unblocking because I wasn't suppressing all of the emotions. I wasn't holding back my own, what I was feeling. I just let it out. But I let it out to a safe person in a safe place. And if you don't have anybody, if you don't have someone that is safe like that, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at carly.lynn. I am more than happy to be that person. I actually have a couple of people in my DMs that I don't talk to consistently, but I am their person. So every once in a while, I get these very angry DMs and I'm like, what did I do? And then I'm like, oh, it's for that person. Like, just specify who it's for and that you're not angry at me, just so I know at the end, like, that it's all fine and good. But once you let yourself process those feelings and get them out, it's not a fix-it. None of this is a fix-it Band-Aid solution. But all of this is a way for you to express your feelings and not suppress your feelings while also keeping yourself safe. So a lot of people are co-parents. I feel this. So I've got a big old bruise on my arm. Sorry, I got distracted by that. If you're co-parenting, you have to have some open form of communication. And I 100% get that. So what I want you to do is I want you to pick one form of communication, preferably a phone number or like a government sanctioned app. There's like apps you can get. Pick one form of communication, or you can even, like, if you want to do Facebook Messenger, I don't recommend this, but you can do Facebook Messenger and you can block everywhere except for Messenger. So that way, if there needs to be video calls or whatever, but highly recommend having it be a phone number and block everywhere else. There's no reason to have any other form of communication. And if it's not about the child, you don't talk about it. You don't talk about how good your day was. You don't talk about how bad your day was. You don't talk about how much you miss somebody. You don't talk about how sad you are, how sick you are. If it's not about the kid, you don't talk. And I know that can be really difficult, but setting that boundary is going to save you. And when they want to make it about not the kid, you don't respond, or you say, hey, this doesn't sound like it's about little Susie. It's not like this isn't about Johnny. So I think you should go take that up with your girlfriend. You should go take that up with your partner. You should go take that up with your new person, because that's not me anymore. And I'm going to be petty for a second. That feels so good. When you're like, I'm not that person for you, but you do have this person, go talk to them. It feels so good because there's a look on their face. Anyway, it feels good. And yes, I'm petty, but I'm petty with the right energy, if that makes sense. But I embrace the pettiness. And so once you do those things, once you're not seeing them together all the time, it gets easier to stop thinking about it. Now, if you are someone with anxiety, with PTSD, with depression or things like that, or you're still just really deep in the trauma bond and you're still healing, like, easier to stop thinking about it seems easier said than done. And it absolutely is. Like it feels so fluffy, but easier may be you only think about them 99 times instead of 100 times, right? Like that feels like it's no big deal. But after a month, you're thinking about them 50 times instead of 100 times. And then 6 months down the road, they maybe cross your mind once in a while. They maybe cross your mind when you are exchanging the child to go to the other parent, right? Like it gets easier over time, and it starts out with small actions that add up. So I talked about this on yesterday's stream about self-gaslighting. But like I mentioned at the beginning when I was talking about how we tend to forget that we share highlight moments, that everybody shares highlight moments. No one shares when it's like in the depths and in the dark, right? We have to ask ourselves, is it really that perfect? Is it true? Is it true that it's perfect? Is it true that things are wonderful? Is it true that just because she posted a picture of herself with the flowers, that everything is fine? Like, without a shadow of doubt, everything is fine behind closed doors. Is that how it was for you? And chances are, when you begin to ask yourself those questions, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. One, you're going to feel really uncomfortable because you're fighting your brain, because there's cognitive dissonance going on, because your brain knows that it's true, that things weren't perfect for you. And chances are he didn't change overnight for this other person. He's being just as garbage for them as they were for you. But you also want to believe that it's perfect, because if you believe that they're perfect, it means that there's a chance that maybe he could be perfect for you. And that's a lot, right? But it's also really difficult because our brain doesn't want still to accept that things in our relationship were as bad as they were. Like, I talk about honeymoon moments a lot, and that's what our brain latches onto, and that's the reason why we get sucked into trauma bonds, because the honeymoon moment and then the abusive moment, and the honeymoon moment and then the abusive moment, right? When we begin to really ask ourselves what our relationship was like, we are faced with the brutal reality that it was not healthy and it wasn't what we wanted. But once you leave the relationship, your brain is flooded with all of the reasons to go back. And all of the reasons why you just want him to be who he was before. So when we get stuck, I have to sneeze. So sorry. Oh, hopefully it passes. But when we get stuck in these phases, we have to shake ourselves out of it and go, no, this wasn't healthy and it wasn't okay. And that can be uncomfortable. And it may not even be all that safe for you to do alone. This may be an exercise that you do with your therapist, where you talk through this in a safe place where they're going to help you manage your thoughts and manage your brain and make sure that you're keeping yourself safe and your children safe and all of that. But also, there is a huge struggle that comes with asking the question, why does she get it all? Because once you realize that things aren't perfect behind closed doors, you can't help, you don't have to like them, but then you also start to get a little bit empathy. And you're like, holy crap, I went through all of that and that caused me so much pain. I should let her know. But you have to remember, and this is kind of like a side note more so on like the narcissistic abuse recovery stuff that I've talked about, but you have to remember that he's thought ahead of time. And he has already told her how crazy you are and how psycho you are and how over emotional you are. So if you try to reach out to her, she's already going to write you off as crazy. So taking the time to do that, I know where your heart is, but it's only going to cause you more heartache. Take that from personal experience on my end. But then that can also be like, well, I don't want to feel bad for her because she is absolutely horrible and she's done these things. I 100% understand. I never will say I know how you feel because I don't. But I can say that I can empathize and I can sympathize with that. And you don't have to like her. You don't have to agree with what she's doing. You can completely disdain her. But that doesn't mean that you get to dismiss what's happening. Not because it's your fault or your responsibility, but because you have to keep that straight in your head. Because your brain is going to continually take you back to that place to wondering why you weren't enough. And if you let your brain live there for too long, you're going to spiral right back down to where you were. And I love you far too much to let you stay there. It is incredibly important to recognize how you feel and become aware of those feelings. And by all means, let yourself feel your feelings. Feel them for however long, grieve for however long, be angry, be sad, be furious, be happy, be whatever it is you feel, there's no wrong. But don't let your fear run away with your feelings. When you let your fear of not enoughness, when you let your fear of unworthiness run away with you or run away with your feelings, you're going to get swallowed up into that dark hole. And that's where things get dangerous. Don't do that. Focus on what you do know. Whether or not you believe it doesn't matter. You know that you deserve better and that you don't want to go back to that situation. You know that you want real love and that what you experienced wasn't real love. You know that you want freedom, and that freedom is far more important than any fleeting honeymoon moment. You've got this, boo. This isn't easy. And I know you hate hearing how strong you are, but you are strong enough. You've got this. I know you can do it. Let me check the comments really quick. I need to adjust where I have my camera because I don't like looking away. You go, girl. I have been in all kinds of toxic relationships, from family to friends to romantic relationships with both men and women. So I support you. Absolutely, boo. See, I am never like excited that someone else has gone through this, but it's just like, there's like a heart connection when you do find someone who has been through it and has experienced it. And it's like, I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you. Not because you've gone through abuse, just to be clear, but just because I can relate to you and I love your energy and I just love meeting other survivors. Just so we're clear, I'm not happy anyone goes through stuff. But as always, if you have any other questions, if you need support, if you need someone to help you out, if you just need someone to talk to vent to, if you need someone to send those angry messages to, just let me know that they're not directed at me. Feel free to send me a DM at carly.lynn. If you're watching here on YouTube, it's in the show description. If you're listening on the podcast, it will be in the show notes. There was something else I was going to say, and then I completely forgot what it was. But make sure that if you are watching on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because I'm going to be going live every day here for the foreseeable future, because I got a lot to say, and it's time. It's time that we start having these uncomfortable conversations, because it's time for us to change and heal ourselves so we can change and heal the next generation. Thanks for hanging out, boo. We'll talk soon.